Did you know we can mathematically prove that the Bible is true? If you don't believe me, give me a chance to show you.
Alright, what is it this time, Brooks? Because every time someone says they can mathematically prove the Bible, what they really mean is that they're about to misuse probability, ignore history, and redefine the word proof. But hey, let's see it.
So first, not only did 40 authors over 1,500 years produce one consistent story and message with tens of thousands of cross-references, but even more amazingly, there are hundreds of fulfilled prophecies.
Okay, pause. That's already 4 claims in one sentence, so let's break it down. So for your first claim, 40 authors over 1,500 years. We don't actually know who wrote large portions of the Bible. Hebrews is anonymous, the Gospels themselves are anonymous, large parts of the Old Testament were compiled over centuries, so this number is mostly myth. So for your second claim of one consistent story, the Bible doesn't actually agree with itself. For example, Jesus' death is described 2 different ways. Hanging in the book of Matthew versus falling apart in the book of Acts. The genealogies of Jesus in Matthew and Luke don't match. And God commands genocide in Joshua but preaches love your enemies in Matthew. That's not one consistent message. Not for your third claim of tens of thousands of cross-references. Cross-references only show that later authors were aware of earlier texts. If I quote Shakespeare, for example, in my book, that doesn't make it divine. As for your fourth claim, hundreds of fulfilled prophecies, we'll get to that because that's where the real gymnastics begin.
And I'll just give you a very small sample of those prophecies pulling from Psalm 22 and Isaiah 53, which perfectly predict the historical facts surrounding Jesus' crucifixion.
Notice what just happened. He said hundreds of prophecies, but immediately jumps to the same 2 chapters every Christian apologist uses. If there were really hundreds, you wouldn't need to recycle Psalm 22 and Isaiah 53 like every time. Psalm 22 is a lament poem by David, describing his own suffering. Christians later read Jesus into it. The my God, why hast thou forsaken me?" line literally callback, not prophecy. And the psalm never mentions crucifixion. That comes from translations and interpretation. Isaiah 53 talks about the suffering servant. In Jewish context, that's Israel, not Jesus. Christianity reinterpreted this after the fact, which, again, not a predictive prophecy.
Philosopher and historian Lydia McGrew ran the probabilities using the standard historical data. Psalm 22 and Isaiah 53 predict things like that the Messiah would be crucified, that he would be silent, non-violent, and innocent, that Roman soldiers would gamble for his clothes, that he would be buried in a rich man's tomb, that no bones would be broken, and so on.
In your own words, context matters, so let's actually apply that. Extraordinary claims like miracles cannot be quantified with subjective probabilities is signed decades after the events. That's not math. Crucifixion was also a common Roman punishment. Claiming Jesus was silent, non-violent, innocent, those are narrative choices, not predictions. Soldiers gambling, rich man's tomb, no bones broken, all of these details appear only in the Gospels, which were written by believers familiar with Scripture. So the prophecies were filled by writing the story to match the verses, not by prediction.
Each detail alone is maybe a coincidence, but all of those together, Lydia McGrew calculates the probability to be 25 million to 1 as Jesus actually being the Messiah.
That number only exists because she multiplies events that are not independent. All the events come from the same source material, plus objective inputs equals meaningless output. That's garbage in, garbage out.
On top of all of that, Jesus fitting those prophecies makes his resurrection not surprising, but expected.
Whoa, that's circular reasoning. If the story was shaped to fit the scriptures, then of course the resurrection is expected. That doesn't make it historical fact.
The external evidence shows that he actually had a resurrection as well. It's like, how could this guy not be the Messiah?
Okay, but you never specify what the external evidence is. And even if some references exist outside the Gospels, none independently confirm a resurrection. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, not decades later texts written by believers.
I'll quickly refute the most popular objection, which is, what if the authors purposely made up those details to fulfill the prophecies?
And speak of the devil, let's see this refutation.
First of all, there's no independent historical reason to believe that beside your psychological bias.
The objection isn't about bias, it's the gospel writers could have made up details to match prophecies. Calling it bias doesn't make it disappear, and Psalm 22 and Isaiah 53 were written centuries earlier. The authors shaped their story to fit these verses. That's retroactive fulfillment, not proof.
Secondly, I take it well established that the Gospels are historically reliable, so to take these details with less credence is arbitrary.
Classic circular reasoning. You're assuming that the Gospels are true to prove prophecy fulfillment. Matthew and Luke's genealogies contradict. Jesus' death is described differently in Matthew 27:5 and Acts 1:18. Resurrection accounts disagree on timing and witnesses. That's not well established.
Thirdly, the apostles themselves were partially convinced that Jesus was the Messiah because of these fulfilled prophecies.
Belief does not equal truth. Acts 2 shows apostles interpreting events in lights of scripture. They weren't discovering prophecy, they were mapping stories onto texts, and partial conviction, that's uncertainty built right in.
Fourthly, many of the prophecies actually very clumsily fit the Old Testament, which we would not expect at all if they were just making up the details to fit.
A clumsy fit is exactly what you expect from human authors trying to match earlier texts. Psalm 22 talks about suffering but no soldiers gambling for clothes. That's Matthew 27:35. Isaiah 53 describes the suffering servant, not crucifixion. Clumsy fit proves human authorship, not miracles.
Lastly, why would the authors make that up and follow a fake Messiah and blaspheme their God? And even more so, risk their lives for what they believed in.
People die for false beliefs all the time. Cults, conspiracies, wars. Acts 5:29 shows apostles obeying God over men, but that's faith, not independent of proof. Sacrifice does not equal truth. So there you have it. 5 points meant to dismiss the idea that authors made up details to fit prophecy. Psychological bias, trusting the Gospels, apostles, belief, clumsy fits, and martyrdom.
That objection is an utter failure. Stop coping.
Each point falls under scrutiny. Stop coping indeed.
It is statistically insane to believe that Jesus is not the Messiah. God bless.
Statistically insane? Huh. Here we go. Remember, circular reasoning, retrofitted prophecies, subjective probabilities. That's not math. That's storytelling dressed as math. And the blessing at the end. After 25 million to 1 math, recycled scriptures, and a failed refutation really ties it together. God bless indeed. So what have we learned from Brooks's mathematical proof of the Bible? Prophecies are retrofitted stories, not predictions. Probabilities are subjective, not independent. Belief and martyrdom don't equal truth, and the Gospels themselves were written by believers who already knew the scriptures. In short, bold claims, zero math, zero independent proof, and lots of recycled scripture. That's impressive rhetoric, but at the end of the day, it's not evidence. Anyways, my name is Avery after Republican with the American United Organization. Be sure to follow me on my socials, otherwise you won't see my face again. Have a good day.